Hi, welcome to Unblinded, a clinical trial podcast. I'm Manny Vazquez, Senior Director of Clinical Data Strategy here at Veeva. I'm joined today by a fantastic group of guests. To my left, we have Mr. Robert Bergann from Bain, my colleague Drew Garty here from Veeva, and from Clinflo, Mr. Doug Bain. Thank all three of you for being here today. So Robert, why don't we start with you? For those out there who do not know who you are, would you mind doing just a quick intro of yourself and some of your background?
Sure. I'm currently running a shop called Clinical Digital Innovation at Bayer's Clinical Development and Operations. And I've qualified for that position by being statistical programmer, data manager, standards man, system integrator for years, doing the full gig in our corner. I'm right now behind introducing Veeva CDMS at our company, making good progress there, and glad to be here.
Great. And Doug, would you mind the same?
Sure. So I am, people call me a veteran, I suppose, especially Drew. But I've been in the industry for a number of years, mostly from the software vendor side of things. More recently, though, I worked at a CRO for 5 years as Chief Technology Officer. And more recently, I founded a consulting company, Clinflo, with an aim to focus on the gap between the technology and the clients. Something that I've seen for a number of years. Really good technology can be applied, but applied in an inappropriate way, and it doesn't result in the sort of savings and the quality that some sponsors expect. So really, I'm working on that interchange, making sure technology works.
Excellent. Well, thank you both again for being here. One of the first things I wanted to put out to you guys is just to start this conversation going. Doug, you'd mentioned that in some of the sessions today, you're hearing some really exciting possibilities about what AI could be, what we could do with it, and maybe some things that I hadn't thought about before. So I want to start off talking about what are the real possibilities. I would really like for us to stay grounded in reality. I want to be very cautious not to start throwing the AI label on everything and just saying, here we go, we've innovated. Like, what are the real use cases that we can sink our teeth into to deliver some legitimate value in the short term?
Well, I think the first point is its value. You say the word value. It's so easy to go, that's cool, let's do that. But it's not just what's cool. I mean, we like cool, if you're all techies. But it's about, first of all, hold on a second, what is the real value? You're trying to identify a problem and you're applying AI to solve that problem. So I do think there's a number of areas. I think when you've got a database, databases hold information and it's been able to leverage that information. So with artificial intelligence, you can take the general knowledge, but you can supplement that knowledge with information in an application database. And all of a sudden go, oh, with the new regulations, there's a requirement, the new ICH GCP R3 release makes it clear that you should be reviewing audit trails. Now, nobody's going to review an audit trail, millions of records. Look, well, that's an interesting record there. There's something about it has to be automated. And AI is in the perfect position to be able to see that looks unusual, through patterns, signals, and so on. So that's, to me, a very obvious one. So instead of people thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have lots of listings, I'm going to have an Excel spreadsheet doing lots of filterings, you can get AI to say, right, I've got patterns to look for, I'm going to detect these patterns and raise the flag, and then actions can be taken on that one. So that was an obvious one. So it's leveraging the data, existing data. Obviously, there's some advantages having longer term data if you're going back a number of years, but you can even within a study is being able to look at patterns of query and data change to go, hold on a minute, this query's been raised X number of times. Maybe we shouldn't be raising it anymore. We've talked about unnecessary queries. Most queries don't fire, but you actually use AI to go, yeah, you don't need that. And, so I think there's some interesting look at the data, the live data as you're going through a trial to say, we can adapt here.
Yeah. The audit trail review is an interesting one. It's been one of the largest topics of conversation in the last 6 months, ever since the guidance dropped. And so, Robert, I'm actually curious, within your role in the sponsor setting, how much has that kind of raised alarm bells for folks
I think we have a procedure about reviewing audit trails, and we don't really do that right now, so it will hit us, yeah. And you're totally right. This is a good use case example. I think good use cases are those where AI, and that's the bottom line strengths, can do things faster than people can do. So anything that requires a lot of studying, a lot of review, a lot of reading, a lot of combinations. And I would point for low-hanging fruits into document generation, document consistency. Yeah? So the documentation side of the world, the data side is certainly an interesting one. Queries, yes, of course. When we have a digital protocol one of these days, generating the EDC creation from that, generating what? The clinical study report, minus the results, because we don't know them yet, but we can wait for them and fill them in. I think the next years will be very interesting for building such automations that are based on a tremendous workforce called AI. Yeah, look forward to that. What that does to the job market is a different story. Yeah, that might be a different discussion too.
It's an important discussion.
It is. Socially, yes.
Drew, your thoughts on this from a technology perspective? Being, within a vendor, we hear a lot of noise about what people would like, or, I think some of the content today was around, I think, trying to articulate what AI is versus what AI is not. And so I'm curious if you could pull on that thread a little bit to just kind of help people understand what it is we're really talking about.
Yeah, so I think to lead into that question, and let's use this as an example, audit trail reviews, a new requirement, should have actually always sort of been there. And why? Because it's behavioral detection. The problem with our methodology is that in order to do that, you mentioned millions of records. It's nothing that a human can do well without tools. And of course, then humans do well with accumulated data in mass through visualizations, seeing detection, signal detection, statistics, identifying those things. But what's interesting is if the goal is to identify behavioral anomalies and issues, why would we do that once a month or once a quarter, right? We actually need to get in front of it. The goal is to actually improve quality. So you have to detect behavioral issues sooner. Now, what would we do? Have humans review that data every single day looking for anomalies? No, we need automation. So from my perspective, getting into, it's sort of the additional tools that are available, because you can use a variety of techniques to automate the detection of anomalies in your audit trail. Statistical analyses works, right? We have to just write programs to routinely look through that data. But leveraging LLMs with good training data sets in concert with, as Doug was saying, a reliable data set, and that brings together that signal detection. It's just another methodology that can be employed. I think what matters from an architectural perspective is maturity. We are at a very explosionary time of new techniques and capabilities, but really we need to have mature, robust solutions. And we're shifting from a deterministic model where meaning of that is effectively you always get the same result, logic, if then else sort of statements, to something where it's non-deterministic. It may give you different answers with the same inputs. How do we work with that? How do we relate to that? There's a human-machine relationship that actually still has to be worked out, especially in a regulated space. And so it sort of leads us down this path of new techniques require probably new foundational understanding and new methods to work with the new tech. And that often takes time to mature. So you have a proof of concept of something. This could do that, but actually it's not yet viable for use in a compliant manner. So we have, and that's where our industry struggles, right? Is we can be on that bleeding edge, but we will bleed.
I think it was Ray who put this up in his show today about which data manager would want to live with getting a different answer every time the question is asked. And I didn't raise my hand. I had to think about it, but I would be happy because it has a reason. There's obviously a learning in the background or new data. So if a result changes, I would like to know about it. And I would like to find out why, understand it. And that's probably the thing. You can't let an AI go alone. You have to watch it. You have to understand what's happening. and you have to intervene if needed. But I wouldn't mind if my query result would change from day to day based on the situation behind. I would mind having to watch query results in general, but that's a different story. Yeah?
I think it's going to be a challenge with the privacy concerns. You know, there's this, you've got the public LLMs that are continually learning, and then you've got more of the private ones that are basically almost like a snapshot in time. And any information, knowledge they're gaining is almost controlled. You're saying you don't want some bad actor, let's say, influencing the decision-making process for your clinical trial, not maybe even obviously, just by whatever mechanisms populates that data. So there might be a better approach to say, actually, we're going to continue to evolve this model in some form of controlled fashion, populating it with information that we consider safe. So that, go back to the example of edit checks where you're getting a different answer. Well, you only want that answer to some extent to be different based on the data that it's getting in that trial, and not potentially data coming from another trial, for example, So I think there's things we have to learn, and it's a case of, learning, improving, and not stumbling and not being bleeding edge, as you put.
I think there's a difference between asking a technology replacing human logic and answers to replace the human decision-making process. I think it's different. You'd be fine, probably, I'm assuming, if it were offering you suggestions, guidance, insights. But if you had an employee who gave you 2 different answers with the same data set, you'd probably grow tired of that person and you'd lose trust. And I think there's this moment where you're comfortable articulating, right, that you'd be fine with a certain lower trust level in certain ways, in certain areas, but probably not the decision and that's controlling an outcome. And so I think that there's a nice on-ramp into this as we build trust and understanding, which I absolutely agree with. That on-ramp to making decisions is suggestions and insights, doing the research, heavy lifting for us, getting us those answers. I think that is the path forward. So that notion of human in the loop, human in control, especially in a heavily regulated area where someone, probably at this time, still needs to be accountable. That we need that methodology.
Which means having to develop the trust in the result.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Statistical trust.
Yeah, there was a meeting I was at a couple months ago, and this was a regulator from the German regulatory body. Really nice guy. Was kind of not. I don't know if he was challenging the idea of human in the loop, but he kind of put the question: how many other things out there could we automate if we wanted to? Like train schedules, trains. You have monorails and things at airports that run autonomously. You could do that, but subway trains, they have conductors. Why? You could make that go automatically. So why does there have to be a conductor there? Because for the same reason, right? Like for the one time you need them there, that human has to be there. Is there a point, do you think, within any of the AI work that we'd be doing within our industry that you get to the point where we actually feel comfortable removing that aspect?
I would go further, actually, because, one of the risks in human in the loop is it's almost like a tick in the box. So let's say AI delivers like a big report over to someone saying, right, time for you to review it. It'd be so easy to say, yeah, that's fine, right? And it's more a rubber stamp. They're actually not reading through and checking the content. So I think it's actually the duty of the systems developers to say, right, we're putting the human in the loop. How do we ensure that this human is empowered to appropriately look at and make decisions on that, and not just be rubber stamp, meeting the regulatory requirement, there we're good. We really need to be careful that we have value in that. And I think if there's no real value, proven no real value, it should be taken away, because it could be a liability potentially.
You're really stating that we have the risk of becoming lazy.
Yeah. There's public
engaged, because if you're not in the detail, Like as data managers, we live in the detail. We feel it when it's wrong. We know, we have instincts associated with it, but if we're not doing the work, what happens to those instincts over time generationally? You step away from it.
It's complacency, right?
It's complacency, but we've had those fears over and over and over again, and the world still continues on. We've felt exactly, this tech is going to do damage and harm, but humanity survives and keeps using it. It's a new tool set. So to your point, what does that look like? I don't know.
I would actually challenge whether my average Berlin Uber driver is better than a self-driving car. Yeah, from the risk perspective. Yeah, I'm not so sure. Yeah, so and the same is probably true for a train conductor. Yeah, in the Berlin Uber network. Is that needed? We still have them. Every train has a person on it. Yeah, why is that so? Is that just tradition? Is that risk management?
You've made a really good point there. It's about risk
Management. That's exactly right.
So you make an assessment and you basically log that assessment. And I think all the AI human-in-the-loop situations, you really should go, right, we're making this assessment, we're formalizing it, and we've decided that because of these scenarios, we don't need the human-in-the-loop, right? I think if you just go, well, you know, we had a quick chat and it was okay, and therefore we didn't have the human-in-the-loop. No, I think the regulators are going to go, show me where you reached a risk assessment for that one.
Yeah, I do think we need to apply, though, quality control, because you have the risk of hallucination from data, right? So having human in loop, if we take that out, which I agree with can be done in certain cases, where's the quality control? That at some point, if you're just allowing full automation and existing data to drive action, and you're using you're not just like stuck on a static data set, but you're allowing it to grow, who's making sure it's right? And so that's managing hallucination and bringing that back in. I do think we become verifiers of accuracy at some point.
Maybe that's a model. You know, you've got test-driven development in software engineering.
Right? Yeah.
Maybe we need something similar on this is what we expect.
Yes.
Did it do it? Right. So it's almost like a test approach up front for everything you do with AI.
Every fifth, whatever it is, or every 50th, do you have the consistent results that you expect?
The Monte Carlo approach too.
Monte Carlo approach, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I like that.
I think a lot of what we said around, it's about like proactivity, right? If we come back to the audit trail review, that's a lot of the very little bit of additional guidance that I've heard regulators give around, you know, how to go about doing this has been about being proactive and not reactive. And so we talked about, you know, having AI to be able to help sift through the millions of records. There's also some tools that have been thrown out there that is putting a large language model on top of large data sets. Like we'll use audit trail just to keep with the theme, but you know, anything that's sitting on top of a large data set to then give a user the ability to go and interrogate that. And so I'm curious if you guys think, like, I feel like that's more of a Pandora's box, right? That's more reactive, right? The data's there. Now you're just going to go and kind of sift through and ask questions about what may or may not be in there. But then it just kind of opens up the world of like anything is possible. How many questions could you realistically ask it? And, you know, when you're talking about audit trail review or something like that, how much of the weight has to be put up on the upfront proactivity? Because I don't know if that's even a practical, you know, review that could be done by someone and call it thorough. You know what I mean?
I think you need to use the tools to answer questions that you know you have first. So there have been many suggestions in the industry about what questions we should answer through audit trail reviews. And I think those take paramount because based on experience, we know what behaviors we're looking for. The only way to get in front of the problem is detect it faster and the things that we are trying to identify. And then on top of that, sure, explore, allow systems to explore, but we don't want too many false positives, right? We've got to look, we actually have to be smart about that and not be wasteful with time by creating new problems that really aren't critical.
On the other hand, nothing that we find should scare us or keep us from finding it, right?
No, for sure.
We're looking for the Friday afternoon syndrome in our audit trail, right? Because we know it's happening.
I love that you have a name for that. That's actually really fun.
But let the AI explore what's in there and let us judge whether that's the case or not. Yeah, and if we extend this from audit trail to real clinical data, we might learn things we didn't see in the first place, but it's for the better of the patient and the world. So why not accept the risk of learning something your product manager wouldn't want to know? Yeah, I think ethically we should exploit that where we can. Yeah, which of course leads us to the fact of where we're starting. Yeah, we can't do it all. We shouldn't do all cases with AI. Have you come across that enthusiasm that wants to do everything with AI, and you gotta regulate?
Yeah,
You might be investing something into something somebody does once in an afternoon in a year.
yeah, I think there's a change management challenge. You might sort of force it by saying, look, you're going to go AI first, right? But that's really just to encourage, the whole organization to go, right, let's try it, let's see what that works. Otherwise, people are just going to go, no, hands up, I'm not going to even try it. So to me, it's, AI first isn't, it's not getting rid of people. It's about trying things and learning and, evolving an organization. And it's just a strategy to do that. Some people are doing it, some people aren't. And I don't think it's a great strategy because I think it terrifies certain people for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting juxtaposition between a lot of conversations that we have within Veeva with customers or potential customers about what change management could look like, and for a lot of the things that people should be doing, at least in our opinion, there is always a hesitancy for change because of the the effort that comes with change management. But when you look at something like AI and it's this new thing where we would say be very pragmatic in your approach, pump your brakes and just be very thoughtful about how you go apply this. This is something that a lot of people seem to be really gung-ho about, just going straight into it, and that they're happy to go down the change management, well, whatever comes along with it. So it's interesting that there's this bit of juxtaposition between things you should do that you're afraid to do and things you probably shouldn't do yet that you just can't wait to go down that rabbit hole.
Back to being a teenager.
Yeah, very much.
We get very excited and we're going to sprint and run that skateboard right into that brick wall. It was a great jump, but it didn't quite land well. I think the key to me though is, look, we need to explore and experiment. It's what percentage of your time do you do that, to what benefit value? And as long as you're targeting the areas that would benefit the most, but are also realistically delivered in a reasonable time period, that's where the investment should go, right? I don't think it's just pie in the sky, explore everything, because that actually wastes resource, right? And as an industry right now, we really can't afford to waste resource. I'd rather have those minds working on things that matter most to Bayer or other organizations.
So what does this look like in practical, like a realistic implementation, when it comes to bringing it in, having some structure and governance around it? And I understand that, we have yet to see the full regulatory landscape for what this needs to look like and what kind of barriers we need to stay within bounds. But just for what we know right now, what would be maybe within Bayer a way that you would practically try and bring some of this in, some things that people could think about to say, maybe I could start to dip my toe in this water?
We're doing something about that right now. I'm sorry, we're probably curbing some enthusiasm of people, but that's not the intention. It's really to keep the enthusiasm and channel it to something useful. So we've created a funnel. We've created a way of telling us the idea and telling us what it would be good for, and we'll assign some stuff that goes back to people to say, what did you mean? Yeah, and what is this good for? And can you give a number to it, right, of whatever kind? And we won't regulate every attempt of doing something with AI. That would be the stupidest thing of all. But it's got to stay under a certain threshold of spend, let's say. Yeah, maybe time or other resources, what have you. But when it goes above a certain line, then it's got to get a business case that is worth for us seeing and fits our strategy too. Yeah, and is not risky in terms of compliance and all of that. So we have to have some good people looking at the cases and say, yep, good one, go.
Doug, I imagine you have this conversation quite a bit with potential current clients.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is fascinating. And I mean, I think it's fascinating in the life cycle of the application of AI. You've got the companies like Veeva who are saying, right, we're looking at our products, and we're looking at AI, and we're going to see what we can do to apply it and to embed it. But you also have the sponsors, the users of software, or not users of software, that are going, oh, we're going to bring our own AI in and sort of bolt it on. And I think you've got a similar challenge that you would face for getting AI. You need to be careful that you don't end up with pieces all over the place, you know, technology, AI, and for the business to be relying all of a sudden on this super duper widget, pulls information from a questionable source and does something that's going to change your business without the control. So I think, you know, you should look at the, I mean, I don't like to use the word validated, but I will, validated implementations of systems with AI, and make sure that, you know, you do something similar within your internal organization. It's not just throw AI at it and it'll be okay. You need to really see that as a technology. You should go through similar life cycle processes, you know, obviously confirming value, but also confirming validity in what you're doing.
Aside from audit trail review, is there a specific use case that really excites you guys?
Protocol simulation is what comes to my mind. Yeah, so that's something we're looking into. Verifying the ideas that we have against not only the data we have, but the data we can acquire or use, which is often brokered or serviced. But seeing that we understand what we're doing to sites, patients, and our data when we set that parameter to right and that one to the left, and see what it does when we change that. And is that any better in terms of probability of success or timing or executability at the sites? That's something I'd be interested in. How far is that AI really? It's based on large data models, yeah, and it has certain models behind to interpret. And it's beyond my capabilities, I have to say, but I know people that do this for their profession, and yeah, that's something we're looking into. That's certainly a case where that you could do at home in a million of years, but AI could look at the 350,000 studies worldwide and tell you that this is an average idea at most.
What about you, Doug?
Yeah, I'm going to be a bit more contentious here. So I actually wrote a blog post. It was on the 1st of April. And it was about how AI was going to take data from EHR and produce a clinical study report. And of course, it was an April Fool. But the principles, actually, you need to be very sort of ambitious in what you could potentially do. And who knows, maybe that would happen. But one I do, and I've got passion for this, I apologize, Drew, I've raised it before. You know, to me, it's a principle of garbage in, garbage out in the life cycle clinical trial. And the garbage at the beginning, I hate to say it, but is a protocol. So the protocol is a document, right? It's got lots of words. And we've just got used to this principle of giving a protocol to each of the departments. You know, biostats will take it, data management will take it. Yeah, they can contribute to it, but basically, you know, go and knock yourself out with it. And we implement studies and we run studies based on that. And that variability, AI can maybe do something with it, but it's going to be a confidence factor. You know, it's 80% there. Now, if you can standardize that, now that's going to make a difference. If you could standardize it, and there's the CDISC USDM standard and the M11 standard, the DDF standard, so they will combine, so you'll sit down and in principle, I think you could sit down and you could define a study with AI supporting it with information from different sources to say, right, that's a study. And what I think we can eventually achieve, and this is a bit radical, is a 0-week study build, right?
Yeah.
So basically you'll gather information, it'll go, hold on, and I can create the whole ECRF and I can put in place all the data cleaning rules that are necessary. And there you go, live. So once you sign off on that protocol, you've got your study build.
I know we're up on time, so I think I'm going to throw a quick wrap-up question at you guys. What would be your current call to action to the industry on something that they need to do or should be thinking about doing to progress us forward, right? It could be as broad or as specific as you like. It could be as friendly or as provocative as you'd like. If it's a specific functional area that you need to call out just to say, hey, we need you to do X, Y, Z in order to move things forward. If you could call an action out, what would that be?
There's a couple of obvious ones on digital data flow and automation and on the trial simulation and document generation. And these are clear to all of us, but they all optimize processes inside a sponsor or inside a CRO. I would call for looking what we can do for our patients using AI on our data, on our processes, on our way of running studies to a successful submission. Yeah, so think what's in it for them, yeah, and focus on that. No idea where this is going, but I'm shooting for that moon.
Great one. Drew.
Wow. So I wish we had a session on this. For me, it is actually foundational, and it's focusing on what matters most. You mentioned patients, you mentioned sites, right, through this conversation. I think there's a realism that, the reality is adding complexity to complexity does not usually lead to simplicity and streamlining, right? And even if it does, the next layer is how could we ever fix or understand when the next layer is needed? So I do think we have to simplify, we have to standardize to really, and that's at the trial level, the design of that trial, making sure we're collecting meaningful data that's actively and analyzed. So again, focus on basics. It's a time of explosionary ideas, techniques, tools, but at the core, we have very clear business challenges that we need to be focused on to solve. And we use the new tools in conjunction with the old methods. I think we can do a lot together immediately.
Excellent. Doug, final word to you.
I love the idea of simplification. I think we are unfortunately guilty in this industry of being additive. We keep adding more and more layers. We'll go back to the beginning of writing edit check-ins. We thought, right, we'll be edit checks and everything. Nobody will need to clean the data. That didn't work. So we added another layer. So I think it's time, hopefully with AI, to say, actually, let's strip away some of these old layers. We don't need them, and simplify it. That will, by the way, take some regulatory changes, and I'd love to see some of these changes, but ultimately, I'm a big fan of simplify.
Excellent. Well, Robert, Drew, Doug, thank you all very much for your time. Appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. It really helps us out. You can find previous episodes on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere that you get your podcasts from. If you'd like to reach out with any feedback or thoughts, or if you'd like to participate as a guest on the podcast, you can reach out to unblindedpod@veeva.com. For now, I'm Manny Vazquez. We'll see you next time.